Welcome to Classic 4x4, the podcast for and by classic four-wheel drive enthusiasts. I'm your host, Chris Piccone, and you can follow the podcast on Instagram at Classic4x4 Podcast. And you can follow my trials, tribulations, and antics collecting and restoring classic four-wheel drives at Overland by the Sea. You know, we talk a lot on the show about passion and community and how classic four-wheel drive enthusiasts, the passion is what really drives them. And they always have this amazing sense of community. When it comes to the international harvester community, there's nobody that has more passion out there, and really the patriarch of the international harvester community is our guest today. And his name is Ryan DuVall. A lot of people know Ryan as the gentleman who has put together the Harvester Homecoming and also is in the process of putting together the official Harvester or unofficial Harvester museum. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for bestowing me as a patriarch. I've never had that happen before. That's
hey, you know, it's my show. I got to make it sound good. What do you want me to tell you?
I need to hire you as my PR guy.
So I will say to all of our listeners out there, if you do not follow Harvester Homecoming on all the social channels, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, make sure you do check them out. Their handle is at Harvester Homecoming. Also, check out their website too. That's harvesterhomecoming.com. They have merch, some great resources, some history, some backstory. And also upcoming is the 5th annual Harvester Homecoming, August 4th to 5th of this year, 2023 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So if you're an international harvester enthusiast or just interested, make sure you're in Fort Wayne, Indiana on August 4th and 5th for the 5th annual Harvester Homecoming. And you can register online or on Facebook. But hey, Ryan, man, tell us, like, where did this deep passion for international harvesters come from? You know, people just don't dedicate their life to a community and be the patriarch of the community out of nowhere. Like, where did this passion come from for you?
Well, my dad gave me a Scout when I turned 16, and that was the rest of history. But no, seriously, my dad had, I didn't want his Scout. It was canary yellow, two-tone primer and Bondo with a cab top. And I was a kid that wanted a street rod. But that was the truck that was given to me when I got my driver's license. And I quickly learned how much power it had. And how much fun you can have when you learn to take the top off that thing. And it became, you know, my dad was cool about it. It was just a normal truck he drove every day. He'd put street tires on it in the summer to get better mileage, he said. I don't know that it made a difference. But, you know, he gave me that truck and I was sort of miffed about it. But, you know, when I realized how much power that 345 had, and when he helped me put a 2.5-inch lift on it, and we put the greatest tire ever made for any international Scout or any off-road vehicle, Desert Dogs. Greatest tire. I wish someone would remake Desert Dogs. I had those tires on it. And it sort of became a mascot for my high school, because even in 1987, when I started driving, there weren't a lot of Scouts around. You know, make the jokes about the rust and all that. And I was the only kid that had one, but it just was such a cool truck because it was tough. It could climb trees. I didn't care if I scratched it up. So I played hard in it. And, you know, I was always the Scout guy. And, you know, so that's where the passion began. I've got a great photo of me sitting on the back of, standing in the back of my original Scout with my mullet waving in the breeze, you know, and stuff like that. It was a true 80s kid. Zubaz pants and the whole done.
I have this visual in my head that's absolutely amazing. Please tell me you had like Zeke Havaricis on or some skids or something in this visual.
It would have been water socks that matched my Zubaz, and dangly earring and my killer loop wraparound sunglasses.
And you definitely had a hypercolor shirt on while you were doing this too.
It was Ocean Pacific. That again matched the blue and my awesome Zubaz pants. But
What a
so
great visual, man. I mean, now you answered one of the questions that I ask everybody, which is, what was your first car or truck? And that, I mean, the fact that you had a Scout 2 as your first car or truck, and that's what launched the passion is, I mean, just absolutely epic. But do you still have, like, in your personal collection right now, do you still have that Scout? What other harvesters do you presently own?
Well, so that Scout, I'm going to try to find it someday. I drove it till I was about 20-ish, and I had to get a more reliable car. And my little brother drove it for a while. And then eventually my dad literally put it out to the farm. He took it to our family farm. They were using it to do some farming, and the transmission went out. By the way, during my run of that first Scout, I've spun the bearings twice in the crankcase, went through one rear end and one transmission. And I was only over about 5 years. So I rode it hard, but he sold that Scout. My uncle used it on the farm for a while. Then the transmission went out, and he sold it for like $500. But so the way the Harvester Homecoming started was, I moved to Fort Wayne in 1999 to work a job here at the newspaper, and I was here for, I don't know, a month or so, and I called my dad, and I said, he was asking how things were going. I said, yeah, you know what's really weird, Dad, is there's a lot of Scouts up around here. And my dad's like, hey, stupid, that's where they built them. And, as a 16-year-old, I didn't really know that. I didn't care what the history of the truck was. It was just cool. And when I moved here, sadly, nobody told me about the great truck history of Fort Wayne, because it had ended production-wise in 1983. So I sort of had to find out on my own about the heavy-duty truck capital of the world and home of the Scout. And so I started looking, and I drove out by the old buildings, and made goosebumps, because you could see, the old buildings in the tower, and there was like something. And I realized, man, this thing was huge, but I still didn't pay a lot of attention to it because I didn't have a Scout yet. Well, back in 2018, it was actually about 7 years ago, my dad was sort of doing his bucket list, and there was a restored hot rod that was sort of a family fight for me and my baby brother. He called me one day and said, I just want you to know I'm redoing the will, and your little brother's getting the Cutlass. It's a 69 Cutlass. I said, well, yeah, that's fine, Dad. He's the baby. He gets everything he wants, like all of the youngest in every family do. And, Dad, you took him to Disney World twice. I never got past Kings Island. We had those conversations. But anyway, he says, but look, he's getting that car, but let's go find you a Scout. And we spent a few years tussling over what one I wanted versus what one he was going to buy me. And then in fall of 2018, I bought a 76 Traveler from a gentleman about an hour and a half south of Fort Wayne, who had a slew of international trucks and parts and old, the typical international guy in his 50s and 60s. And the first thing I did was I said, I'm going to tell a story to the readers of our newspaper. I parked that truck in front of the tower out here in Fort Wayne, the famous International Tower. You can Google it and see it. It's a iconic piece of the company's history. And I wrote a story about my connection to Fort Wayne through a truck. And I didn't make it all about me. There's a lot about me, but I talked to a couple of retirees, one of the top parts guys in the world. And just sort of tried to make it about, why aren't we celebrating the great history that place had? Just north of here in Auburn, Indiana, there's an Auburn Court and Duesenberg Museum. There's those old classic limousine style cars. They celebrate them there with the museum. They have a festival every year. You go to South Bend, there's the Studebaker Museum. They have a festival every year. So I said in this article, I said, it's a shame we can't do the same with the Scouts and the international trucks here, because I said it was the truck capital of the world. That got people talking. I got calls from the local history center wanting to, hey, why don't you hold an event and raise some money for us? So it got me thinking. And after about a month, I realized, there was just something telling me, let's do a Scout show in Fort Wayne. And my journalism career helped in this facet, because I'm actually a restaurant critic at the newspaper. So as I went out to try to plan this, I said, let's have it at the old Scout factory. Well, the Scout factory now is owned by a family, the Titman family, who make restaurant equipment. They make griddles, big freezers, and all sorts of. So when I called, they made the patriarch of that family and asked for a meeting. They immediately made the meetings. They're like, "Oh, the restaurant critics calling us. Yeah. You can help. We sell restaurant
great
equipment."
Connection. Yeah.
It just and they walked in there and said, "Hey, I want to have a Scout show here at the truck show and celebrate. Sure, knock yourself out. You can have the whole place." And the Proving Grounds Test Track, a legendary testing facility that Harvester used from 1928 until 2015. The oldest test track in the world. I knew the guy who owned it and was doing nothing with it. He was a real estate magnate, so to speak, who owned a lot of sports cars, and he also owned a lot of restaurants. So I called him and said, "Hey, is there any chance I could let a bunch of old Scout guys go on he let me use the test track, which was amazing. We were able to use it for 2 years before they sadly destroyed it. But so all those things came together, and it all blew up, and it's been great. But to get to the long answer to your question, so I still have that 76 Scout. I have a 1973 Travelall 1010 two-wheel drive that my daughter calls the hearse, or sometimes it's just the boat anchor, because that's, all my wife thinks it's good to be. Those are the two that I own. I also own, my family, my dad owns a 1951 L112 pickup. My brother just bought a 66 International pickup. This has all happened because of a certain show. And I'm going to have another Scout here soon, because my 14-year-old daughter, my youngest daughter, my two boys who are 20 and 17, they're the sports car kids, and they don't have it. My 14-year-old daughter says, "Dad, when I turn 16, I want a Scout 80.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. And so, but now I've got to find one and make it safe for her to drive, which will be fun. But so, yeah. So, and like I said, and the museum collection, even though it's not mine, some of the donations and stuff we've gotten, I consider them my babies, just because, they came to us and I get to drive them once in a while. But only two that I own right now.
It's funny that museum collection is actually how we came together. I've had some pretty epic, IH builders and enthusiasts on the show. Season 1, we had Dan Hayes, who I know you know very well. Many people know him out there as Binder Boneyard. He is like really the preeminent late model Scout fabricator, builder, restorer out there. He does an amazing job, and on the other end of the spectrum, in season 1, we had Eric Tessimer, who a lot of people know him as Bare Knuckle Binder, but like he just combs across the country and saves early medium duty International harvesters from the crusher, from, he finds them in junkyards. He finds them in every odd corner and brings them all back to life and drives them back to Austin, Texas. But, this season I had Caleb Jacobs on as a guest, who is, many people know, is the truck editor for The Drive. And he had written an article about these really cool, specialty fabricated, purpose-built international harvesters that were used as actually like a tour vehicle through the dunes somewhere in the Southwest, and they were called these dune scooters. And you actually ended up finding them, saving them, and bringing them to the museum. So that's how we came together, right?
I wish I got credit for that, but so I actually didn't have to find them where at Mac Woods Dune Rides out of Silver Lake, Michigan. Right on they've been at it since the 30s. They started doing dune rides in Model A's. And eventually, as the years went on, they did Studebakers, moved on. And throughout the 70s, 60s and 70s, they made these dune scooters. You can see photos of them on our websites and at the Drive where they did that article. And they're basically, they would take a pickup truck or a chassis and stretch it out and put 5 rows of seats, like a carnival ride, with one big giant seat belt that would hold people in. And they put airplane tires on them, and they would fly through the dunes, and people would pay to take rides on these things. And they, like I said, they've done this since the 30s. And, in the 60s and 70s, it was internationals because that made sense. You needed a tough truck that was going to be able to do those crazy dunes rides. And who was the top, even, truck builder in the country at the time? That's who you went with. Well, I was aware of those. I've got, seen pictures and posters, and people had told me they've been up to ride on them. And I was at my show this year, and we had our VIP guest was there, and he just left. I was just sort of standing out behind the back of the garage, taking a breath. And up runs a gentleman named Eric McDaniel. He is a scout aficionado who runs the event called Scouting the Dunes up there in Silver Lake. And he says, "Ryan, we need to talk. I think I might be able to get you a dune scooter for the museum." And he explained to me that Mac Woods, a family, was doing a sort of a downsizing. They're now using Ford trucks because they can't. Internationals aren't exactly easy to find parts for. They're old, they're heavy. So now they use Ford van chassis with pickup front ends and make them that way. And they're more reliable. And this is a money-making tourist attraction. So it was never about the truck for them. It was about, being able to give people rides. So I said, this would be great. He gave me a number. I called it the next week and talked to the owner. And I said, I heard you were wanting to parcel out a couple of internationals to make room for new trucks. He said, yeah, we're going to have to do something with them. We're still got a couple internationals we're going to keep. He said, but yeah, I think we could donate one to you. I think it'd be great. And I said, and I'm trying to be cautious and said, I don't want to, look the gift horse in the mouth, but if we could get one that runs, it would be great because we could use it to give tours of plant grounds here and do things with it. And, it's a fun thing for a museum and a nonprofit to have. Load 25 people on a truck and drive around.
Super cool idea.
Yeah. He says, now I don't want to overstep either, but let me ask you, Ryan, would you take 2 that run? What? Yes, I would. But this is where we've come, and this is happening, every day. I've got 4 trucks. The people are giving us trucks to as a donation because they see the legacy we're creating here. And there's so many guys with old trucks that they don't know where to put them when they're going to be gone. They're going to go to auction or something. But yeah, so we got the 68 dune scooter and the 75, and we're going to put them to good use. They're really cool. And you can read the story on the Drive, but it was kind of a weird happenstance. As we were leaving the dunes area that day, we met a gentleman who was 86 years old, and he'd worked at the dunes, Mac Woods Dunes, for 71 years.
Wow.
So he started when he was 14, and he stopped and talked to us and told us how he would, these trucks were all stretched by me. I trust the axles. I did all of it. This was back in the day. And he says, I'm going to send you a picture of that one. And he pointed to the truck up on the bed. He says, I would go to the Springfield, Ohio plant and pick up these trucks. They'd be standard, big, heavy, 4-wheel drive pickup with nothing but the hood and fenders. There was no windshield, no seats, no bed. So it was basically framed from that front quarter on back. He says, I would drive those from Springfield, Ohio back to Silver Lake, which is a good 8-hour drive, sitting on a milk crate. Now, I was like, wow. And sure enough, I have a picture of that gentleman pulling into his driveway. Back in those days in 1968, you could do that. There were no seatbelt laws. And you just see there's some guy on a backcountry road with a milk crate as a seat. And, but yeah, so for example, we're getting a lot of trucks given to us, which is great. Navistar has made us the keeper of its collection of trucks, 43 of them.
That's cool.
The finest international trucks in the world. And they keep adding to it. And, you know, so those stretch from we just had an event 2 weekends ago in the 1907 prototype auto buggy. So 1907 was the first year International made a vehicle for, you know, a regular vehicle. Mm-hmm. The prototype, the very first of the very first, we had running and driving around. So we have trucks from Navistar from 1907 to 2021. We also have an electric truck. And they've been great. And that all comes back from the first festival. You know, our connection with Navistar happened there because, you know, when I had that first festival, we knew it was going to be kind of neat because Fort Wayne really had sort of ignored the history, like I said, and they hadn't told me about it. And so, you know, I went into planning this festival, and I had, you know, friends from the radio stations and stuff who've done events. I was filling out my paperwork for insurance. And I said, hey, I asked my buddy, I said, I want to put down 2,000 people. It's like, I don't know. It's a lot of people. You know, this is a first time thing. I had basically 6 months to plan it. Yeah. You know, and you know, I was going up against the Scout Nationals the next weekend, and he says, maybe you should keep it put it down around 800 people and hope you have that many people. But help my insurance. Yeah. So I stood there on August 10th of 2019 in the middle of the grass field outside the Scout plant, and literally, and I get emotional. I'm sorry. I'm like a big girl sometimes. I shouldn't say that because men cry too, and I gotta woke myself. It's okay.
I'll virtually hug you also.
No, I stood there and cried because that morning there was a line of trucks as far as I could see down the Lincoln Highway, and that 800 people. And, you know, I said going into the weekend, if we have 200 trucks and 2,000 people, it'll be a great weekend. We had well over 600 trucks and 12,000 people show up.
Wow. And
it blew us out of the water, and it's been an emotional roller coaster of greatness ever since. So,
and I'm sure your insurance underwriters were very happy that nothing bad happened, right?
Yeah, I had the test track too. We were running people out there. They came back the next year, and they wrote up my quote. And I go, whoa, because it was like that's a lot. He's like, well, you pay per visitor. And,
yeah.
Oh yeah. So that first bill was for 800 people. This is for 12,000 people. I get it. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we're rounding this back up with those dune trucks. You know, it's just an amazing thing that they've done to let us have those. And we're anxious to use them, but, you know, we're getting this kind of stuff. I had a guy from California call me 2 days ago. He's got a early 4070B day cab semi-truck that he wants to donate. Just because he's heard of us and he's got one.
The definition of community as a whole. The fact that you have these people reaching out to you and you have these connections where people want to preserve the heritage, the history, and they have that passion to donate. And these aren't $500 trucks either. These things would cross the block at big dollars. You know, the fact that they're just willing to donate that to you is literally the sense of community as a whole. But the Dune Scooter story that Keogh Jacobs wrote was super neat. And you know what? I'm just realizing I assumed that these dune tours were, you know, were somewhere in the desert in the Southwest. I had no idea that Michigan even had dunes, let alone enough dunes to have tours. So
Indiana has dunes too. We have dunes up here in northwest Indiana. So there's some dunes here.
You learn something new every day, that there's dunes in the Midwest. Like I live in a coastal community, you know, 100 yards from the beach. So when I think of dunes, that's what I think of, you know, sand and somewhere on the coast, always on the coast, but also, you know, the deserts of the Southwest. So you learn something new every day, that there are dunes in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's funny because you can Google, if you Google, you know, SS2 Scout, you know, images, you will see an old ad of a guy with some cool 70s sunglasses. It looks like your dad. You know, he's not like a cool guy. He's more like a family father, just jumping this dune, this SS2 through a sand dune, flying through the air. And it was a really popular ad. And that was done up at the dunes in Michigan. It wasn't done, because there were dunes here. And I've heard so many stories about, the scouts going up to the dunes. I had a great one that one of the retirees told me that, so they had a lease program here. You could lease trucks if you're management, you could lease trucks from the company. I know one manager would get a different truck every month. And you could also, buy them from the company for cheaper, as most is usually still the case if you work for an automotive company. But you also could rent one out, borrow one for a weekend. And one of the retirees told me, he says, he looked at my Traveler and he's, with that longer wheelbase, says, I remember my first Traveler story. It was great. Yeah. I borrowed one from the company to take my family up to the dunes for the weekend. And I had me and the wife and the 3 girls in the back seat, and it was loaded down with picnic baskets and tables. And I saw this dune. I saw these little souped up, buggies going around the dunes. And I saw this really big hill. And I saw these guys struggling to get up it. I said, well, we're going to try it. So I stuck that thing in 4 low, and just started crawling up the dune. Mind you, this is a stock truck from the factory, nothing. Yeah. And he says, pretty soon I passed one Jeep, and they're looking all right, passed Bronco. He says, all these souped up, what they thought were struggling to get up the hill. And he says, I just drove up it like I was driving up the driveway. Can you imagine if you're a Jeep guy, you're in your Jeep struggling and fighting and thinking you're doing something really cool to get up and do it. And then here comes the family truckster with the dog and the kids and the picnic, just drives right past you and goes up the hill. But that's why those trucks are so special. They were made to do things that other trucks couldn't do.
I mean, they didn't start out as a suburban, family truckster. I mean, these things were purpose built, and that's the heritage of International in the first place. Let's talk a little bit about the homecoming, because you had that first one you talked about where you thought it was going to be 800 people. It was 12,000 people. And it's evolved, and it's a massive event. You're having your 5th one this year, again, August 4th and 5th. So if you're into harvesters, you need to make sure that you're up in Fort Wayne, Indiana for August 4th and 5th for the 5th annual Harvester Homecoming. But, as this thing has evolved, one of the biggest things that people don't realize is who actually owns the intellectual property of International Harvester. International Harvester hasn't made, like you said earlier, hasn't passenger vehicles since 83. Obviously, they do make trucks. Navistar obviously owns and manufactures International trucks. But I guess about 2 years ago, Triton acquired Navistar, and a lot of people don't know that Triton is VW or Volkswagen Group's truck division. So as you kind of roll this up, you have International Harvester owned by Navistar, owned by Triton, which is owned by Volkswagen Group. So really the Volkswagen Group owns all the intellectual property to International Harvester right now. And you mentioned earlier that last year you had a VIP guest, and I think we should talk about this because this is amazing. You had the CEO of Volkswagen Group at the 4th annual Harvester Homecoming last year, which the CEO of a global automotive manufacturer just doesn't come to Fort Wayne, Indiana on a weekend in August to hang out. He's there because there's something on the drawing board that is about to come to fruition. There is a probability it could come to fruition, and that's the Volkswagen Group bringing the Scout brand and manufacturing modern day Scouts. And there's a possibility that might come to fruition. So talk to us about how did the CEO of VW end up at the 4th annual Harvester Homecoming, and what were they talking about when it came to possibly bringing the Scout brand back?
So it's sort of after that first show, there were a lot of Navistar retirees and guys came down from Chicago that had started working in Fort Wayne. They closed the engineering side and testing side of our facility down in 2012, which wasn't that long ago. They saw how big an impact, and they had this collection of trucks, 40 some odd trucks that they were going to try to start a museum in Chicago. But in a city like Chicago would have been white noise for a lot of people. They came to our homecoming and said, let's make the museum happen there. That's the right place. So we have a very close relationship with Navistar ever since. And I can't thank them enough for everything they've done for us. But here's where it comes in interesting. It would have been a little over a year ago in January. I got a call from one of my contacts at Navistar, a vice president. And he says, Ryan, I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're going to do, but you can probably guess, or you'll be able to figure it out. This is all between you and me. I had to do a non-disclosure. He says, we're going to make an announcement at your show this year. We hope to, that's going to make national headlines. And at the time I thought, well, something EV, maybe they're working on an actual EV semi-tractor. They were testing and stuff. Maybe that's going to be it. But in the back of my head, I said, maybe they're going to build a Scout, because I knew the Volkswagen had taken over. And I knew that when I say taken over, I mean, on a paper sense, Navistar still runs its own operation, just like for Volkswagen, Audi runs its own operation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people don't realize it's a Volkswagen, company. And so I thought, Volkswagen doesn't have a niche in the SUV market, at least not in they have little car style SUVs. So I'm thinking they're going to, announce the Scout's coming back. It sounds crazy. And that's sort of what I was sort of teased into believing. They didn't want to tell me, but they made it pretty clear. So here I am, the guy that runs the Harvester Homecoming and knows all these Scout people. And in January of last year, I find out the Scout's going to be reborn, and I can't tell anybody, which is just insane.
Yeah.
So I'm planning, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make the announcement? How do we get everyone invited here? I'm just, I know Navistar is going to handle that. Volkswagen. Well, around June, all of a sudden a story pops up. Scout's coming back in EV. Someone basically broke the story by they tapped into. Yeah, they leaked it, and the actual story, I actually know sort of the background behind it, is they tapped into one of Navistar's a subsidiary they work with, had some drawings that were probably 3 or 4 years old of a concept Scout. So the backstory here is that Navistar had been toying around with the idea of bringing back the Scout for quite a while, almost 10 years. I've got some drawings that someone did about 10 years ago where they look, like Ford trucks do now. And, the designers and engineers, there was always a thought we should bring back the Scout, but there wasn't and they were really serious about doing it as an EV, because the company they got tapped into was an EV battery supplier.
Okay.
And so they started doing some concept drawings, just sort of playing around 3 years ago. But at the time, Navistar, they didn't have a factory that was tooled to make a smaller truck. You're talking about to do an electric truck, build a whole new factory. Mm-hmm. And Navistar, International Trucks has been ahead of the curve on electric. They've had an electric delivery van. It's been in the works for well over a decade. That there's prototypes of, and you can actually buy a little Matchbox car of their little electric van. And there's an electric school bus they made, and they've been ahead of the curve on that. So it made sense that they were working on that. And basically they didn't have the money to build a whole new thing. They weren't, the company was big, but like building a whole new factory and taking the chance on building a EV Scout was going to be a monumental task that Navistar wasn't equipped to do after some of the problems they had as a company over the last decade and a half. So then Volkswagen Group, which was a minority shareholder up until 2 years ago, bought out the rest of the Navistar. They bought the rest of Navistar and put it under their Traton umbrella. Now all of a sudden you've got the most powerful automotive maker in the world owning you, so to speak. So guess what? Navistar took their plan from the Scout, met with the officials at Volkswagen and said, hey, this is what we've been wanting to do. What do you think? And, there's the head of Traton has been on an interview he did. He said they showed us something. They made us an offer we couldn't refuse. Plan was so good. It was exactly what Volkswagen wanted to try to do. So they said, let's do this. And So I was worried because here this news breaks in June. It ruins the big surprise I was going to have at my show. And I was like really disappointed. Then I get a call about 2 weeks before my show from my Navistar executive. Hey, Ryan, I want to ask if you think it'd be okay for the CEO of Volkswagen USA to come to the show. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe. Yes.
Well, but here's the thing. He's like, I don't know if, and his name's Scott Keogh. He goes, I'll have to get back with you because I don't know. He might just want to come undercover, so to speak, and just hang out and learn from you and stuff. I said, I'll do whatever I got to do. I won't tell a soul, but let me know if we can tell a soul because I'll also get, some stuff lined up. And we went back and forth whether he was, so he wanted to come, but there were actually, I found out later, some people in his world, so to speak, saying, oh, you don't want to go to that truck show in Indiana. You're not going to learn anything there, because there's like, just like you were saying, the CEO doesn't go to a truck show and hang out.
Yeah.
The CEO also has sort of an idea of, it's a truck show with a bunch of, hoot and holler and, it's a truck. There's like a stigma with a truck show crowd that people have the wrong idea of what every truck is. Our truck show crowd's not that. There are truck shows with a lot of guys shooting guns, but it was so he was sort of being steered. Maybe you don't want to do that. I don't know. Long story short, I find out, all right, he's coming 2 days before my show. Now, mind you, cool. I couldn't put out a press release. He says, and he's open to talking to everybody. All right, well, here I'm in the middle of the show. Awesome. He's like, can you do can you go ahead and just do the press release and we'll send it? Don't you have a team of people? So I have to 2 days before my show, sit down and do a press release. I got in contact with all the city and county officials here because, if they're going to build a Scout, they should do it here again. So basically within 24 hours, I had the mayor of two cities, New Haven, which is a neighboring city, right on the Harvesters, right on the border of New Haven and Fort Wayne. And had both mayors, economic development head, and one of the county commissioners ready to have a seat at the table with Scott Keogh, who, mind you, when he came to our show, wasn't even the Scout Motors CEO yet. He was still Volkswagen. He didn't take over Scout Motors until a month later. So I always tell people I had the CEO of Scout Motors here before he was the CEO of Scout Motors. But he, so get that press release out and everyone's ready and, alerted the media. And I'm standing there, that he's coming in on our show's Friday, Saturday. He's going to fly in on Friday and he's going to spend the whole day Saturday, but he's going to fly in from far away and he's going to go rest and he's going to just come for the whole day Saturday. And I know that I'm going to go meet him at the airport with my Navistar contact who was at the show at the time. He was there. He's like, you can drive me out to the airport and we'll meet him. And I'm standing out there Thursday. And then one of the guys says, oh, you're going to take your Scout, right? You got to pick him up in your Scout.
Makes sense.
I'm like, oh. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. I should. Well, me, I'm standing there looking around at all these new guys coming in early. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why don't we pick him up in every Scout? So again, I get on the phone on Thursday.
Parade style?
Yeah.
That is cool. Good idea, man.
Yeah. It's, I get on the phone with the city officials and the airport officials. We can get behind the security near the tarmac. And basically I went around and talked to guys. Hey, you want to go meet the Scout CEO? So I had, when he, going there, we did a parade out there. I had a Scout 80, a Scout 800, a Scout 2, a Scout 2 diesel, an SS2, I'm trying to remember what else I'm forgetting. Basically one of every model there, with hand-picked guys that I knew would be up for this. Oh, a Terra, Travel All, all those. Mm-hmm. And so we pull in the airport and we line them up right along where he'll walk out at the terminal, and I can on a circle driveway, so they're all. But I said, look, we got to keep this secret. I don't want him to know this. It's sort of a surprise. So I kicked all of the people that own the trucks out of the terminal when his plane landed and said, go sit by your trucks and wait, because if he sees this crowd, he's going to know something's up.
Yeah.
Scott gets out, he meets me, he shakes my, he's like, he's been reading up, he's excited, he wants to see the old Scout plant, all this stuff. And, we're doing the shaking hands and nodding heads, and we walk towards the door. And I said, well, I know you're going back to the hotel tonight, but I thought, if you're going to go back to the hotel, we can't just take you back to the hotel in any kind of vehicle. And you see him kind of like, oh, I'm going, he's getting the idea of what I'm doing. I said, someone told me I should take you to the hotel on a Scout. I couldn't settle on one. So, and we literally, the door opened, he walked out, and I put my arm out, and was like, choose.
Yeah.
And you could see in his face, he just lit up like a little kid, beaming and blushing. He's like, and he threw his bags down. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And he spent a good 15 minutes or so with each of those trucks and walked through, and was just, I knew I had him. I knew he was, and I had a really good feeling about him being the right guy for this, because you don't know, you're dealing with Volkswagen European automotives versus, good old pickup trucks. But I knew right then that this was going to be a good visit, and it was going to be good. That's the great thing. I talked to my Navistar contacts, and they were like, you really got to press on this guy how important the removable top is to you guys, because that's something Volkswagen's not familiar with. They don't do a lot of that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'll do. But he go through all those vehicles, and he chose the 64 Scout 80 with the top off, and rode dirty with the top off from the airport to his hotel. I'm like, there's another good sign. There were some really nice Scouts in that line. He chose the oldest one that was bare top. It was a beautiful day. So, and that's the one he chose. And I think he's probably smart about it. Like, I choose it. But I also think, and this is the truth, as I've watched this process of them working to build this new Scout, I think, and there's drawings that are out there. There's sort of a black silhouetted drawings from the side and those are really old. Those are not the newest. Those aren't the concept drawings. Nobody's really seen the official concept drawing yet. But I have a feeling that the first EV Scout is going to harken back to that original square body 80 and 800 Scout, rather than the Scout 2 with its smooth, whale lines. Yeah. And I'm just doing that based on what I experienced with him and what he was studying and what he was paying attention to. And if you're following Scout Motors on social media, they're putting out a lot of pictures of the original body style. Mm-hmm. I don't know that for a fact, and if you think of the Bronco, when they brought it back, it'd be a similar style, that early 60s style versus 70s style. So I think he made the smart move there, and I think that's the way that new truck's going to look. But yeah, we didn't invite him. I had people saying, "Oh, it was a great idea to invite him." I said, no, he invited himself, and I wasn't saying that confidently. I don't get too cocky about what we've done here, but in this case, I'm like, yeah, the CEO of Volkswagen wanted to come to my show and learn, and he spent the whole. It was great. He was really down to earth, and it was really, really one of the most special days I've had since that first show.
And I love that he chose the 80 of all of them top. I mean, there was you said there was an SS2 there. There was a Scout 2 that has the SD33 diesel engine. Of all the things, he chose the 80. Yeah. So that is super cool.
It was the most natural looking Scout too. It wasn't it wasn't perfectly painted, or it looked like, it's my top mechanic guy that worked at the factory. He was sort of stunned. I said, Greg, go down there and pick up the CEO. He was like stunned that I asked him to go to start with, because his truck's a regular old truck. It's patinaed, so to speak. And, then when I told him, hey, you're taking him, he was like, what? All these beautiful, there's a perfect snow star sitting back there that's just beautiful. And he wants to ride in the old beat up 80. Not this beat up, but it shows its age, let's just say.
It's a patina runner, it's and that proves that everybody loves patina. Also, even CEOs of global automotive manufacturers love a good patina. Right?
Well, it's funny that all these years, Scouts, they rusted like crazy. Oh, they were rust buckets. Now they were patina.
Yeah.
Now it's not about they rust. It's patina.
And I'm sure that there are a lot of IH purists out there that have their own opinions on Volkswagen Group bringing the Scout back to life and what it'll be. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, that only benefits the community as a whole. Look at, like, you just mentioned Ford and the Bronco revival. For that new generation Bronco, like, look at what Ford bringing that new generation Bronco back into production did for the first gen, the second gen, even all the way to, bull nose and brick nose and OBS Broncos. Like, look what it did to that not only the values, but that community. I mean, you're going to see the same thing happen in the Scout community. There's no question.
Well, here's the thing, and I don't say we're to blame, but after our first show, Haggerty and Car and Driver both put the International Scout on the list of hot new, I can't remember what they call it.
They call them their concepts.
Well, what ones do you want? Like, what old trucks should you buy? Old cars. It was on both of their lists of, hey, go buy Scouts. There's a ton of them. They were made a bunch of them. You'll find them in fields. They had issues. The price of Scouts jumped significantly after our show and in the years following. So, like, in our community now, like the bringing the Scout back and getting all these, and like I said, I'm not trying to be crass, but all these rich folk now are going to want to come and buy one of the original Scouts. And, it's like the good old boys versus, it's hard to buy a Scout now for less than $40,000. I mean, even if it's, it's, if I told you what I paid for my Traveler, which is, I mean, it's beautiful and it's a great truck, I wouldn't sell it for less than 15 to 20,000 more than I paid for it back in 2018. That's how crazy it is. And that's where the community, it's great that it's bringing awareness and more popularity, but for a guy who I know who's got a 14-year-old daughter that wants a Scout 80 in the next 2 years, it's a lot. I wish I'd have known she was going to want one back in 2017 before I started the show. I could have got her.
But it's your own fault. It's your own fault in the end.
I know. And she keeps saying, "Dad, you run you should be able to find one. You run the show, everything." I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to be able to, pull 50 grand out of my pocket to get you,
nobody's giving them away. You might know where to get them, but they're not going to give them away, of course.
Yeah. Well, and even the good old boy, parts guys now have gotten smarter. Like, it used to be, you'd go to a guy that had parts and, you just sort of, now they're aware of the price increase. And like, you want to try to buy a window frame for a Scout 2 right now that's not rusted out. I mean, you're looking at over almost, $2,000. It's crazy how much, because the window frames are one of those things that rusted bad and they're hard to find. And so you can pay $2,000 for a window frame. It wasn't that. I know one of my guys here remembers buying 20 Scouts at one time for less than $2,000 back in the, early 90s, because the guy had a bunch of them on his land. And it's just insane,
There's always that shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? You have that in everything throughout life, but that is super cool. So, as we kind of start to get into the end here, we'll wrap up with the Harvester Homecoming, and you have that coming up this year. Hey, I hope that Volkswagen Group decides to, bring the official concept and unveil that at Harvester Homecoming instead of just an auto show somewhere in the world. But I'm going to ask you this question: what is, and this is a multi-part question. This is a multi-part question. It is, what do you feel that the probability of the Scout coming back and going back into mass production as a new generation vehicle? So that's number one. Number two, what's the probability that gets announced at another, and the concept gets shown at another Harvester Homecoming event?
Okay, well, I answer the second part first, because there's been this sort of sad face thing since they didn't get to make the announcement at Harvester Homecoming. And I've sort of been, I don't take anything for granted. I don't want to speak out of turn, but there's a good chance that in August of this year, you might see some type of concept vehicle unveiled. But I don't take it for granted, because, it's coming back. Scout Motors is legitimately up now. Now they're hiring. They're looking for people. They're searching for a place to build these trucks. And Fort Wayne is making a push. it's, I'm sort of there trying to help Fort Wayne make a push as much as I can, because, if you're going to bring a truck back that hasn't been made since 1980, you want to do it, and you can do it where they did it, originally, the story just writes itself. And you can do it. We're just down the road. You've got the big International Harvester Museum with scouts galore. I mean, and it's, we have more scouts at our show than most people have trucks at their show. And I told the folks from Scout Motors that were here, I'm like, if you want to come do marketing here, give me a couple days and I'll have as many scouts as you want lined up for any kind of shoot you want to do, because, that's why our event became so big. There are so many scouts here. Some of them aren't showpieces that are out and about. I mean, there's so many guys that work there that just have a Scout in the garage that they drive once in a while, or that don't drive at all. So it's coming back, and I'm hoping that there's something happens here in August. But they are, it's Volkswagen. It's a big company. There's a lot of people that are going to be, trying to decide what's the best move. Where do we announce it at? I just sit back and let things happen, because, and this is what one, John Glancy, who, runs Super Scout Specialist, who's been doing shows for 30 plus years. He one time a couple of years ago said, you're not playing fair, because, I got Fort Wayne. I decided to do this, and I was just the one schlub that decided the time was right. But there's a lot of thought that went into that in terms of where we are as a country and political stuff. And there seemed to be a real trend of people, all these memory pages you see online, and the good old days, and the boomers are getting older, and the kids of boomers like myself are getting older. And so I said the time was right. And, if they want to unveil a prototype for the new Scout, why wouldn't they want to do it in Fort Wayne, Indiana?
Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I've got that on my side. I don't have to, I don't have to sell Fort Wayne to them. They know the story, and they really know the story after spending the day here. And, you mentioned like the EV side of it. People are not sure about, we had, when I took Scott around, I introduced him to some people that I knew were going to be like, why aren't they putting a diesel in it? You got that TDI diesel, just put that in and make it good. Why aren't you going to do it? Tell me you're going to do a gas version also, Scott told me, I said, what do I tell those people? He says, well, you got to tell them that any company right now making a new concept vehicle is doing an EV. It's just a fact of life. All everything's pointing that way. And there's going to be stipulations. We're already seeing it in the diesel world with regulations. As the regulations are going to keep coming, and if you're going to start building a vehicle from scratch right now, you're going to do it electric, because otherwise it's bad business. But I took him to people that were going to ask those questions, and I took him to people that like for me, I hope they give me the first EV Scout, because I think I deserve it.
Yeah.
But then I don't have to, but and I'll be glad to take it, because I'm nobody can really.
I hope that first EV Scout ends up in the museum. That's where I really hope it ends up.
That's where the concept.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, but like right now, for those of us here in Northeast Indiana, to like, if you were to offer me an electric truck tomorrow, it's not feasible. I can't charge it in enough places. I can't give it enough. But remember, they're not talking about putting this truck out until 2026. So what I tell the people that follow me that are all negative Nellies about the EV thing, I'm like, by 2026, you can't try all those things. Biden just gave every state a ton of money to build charging ports. It's going to happen if it's going to happen.
Oh, the infrastructure is growing, and it's growing exponentially. I mean, that's not the fact that EV is the future. It's not will it happen? It's gonna happen, and the infrastructure is growing, and there's a lot of private companies that are driving that infrastructure, especially from a profit standpoint, that are taking advantage of subsidies out there. So to kind of wrap back to that probability, it sounds like there is a very, 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 very high percentage probability that the Scout will be brought back and mass produced, and there's also a probability that hopefully that gets announced at Harvester Homecoming. But
Yeah.
Ryan,
Yeah.
man.
It's the future is bright for anyone that loves Scouts, because I know that this, from what I know, you're one of those, if I tell you, I'd have to kill you kind of stuff. But this new Scout that they're building is going to be the kind of electric vehicle that is not out there right now. And I think people that love the original brand are going to, if everything happens the way they're telling me it's going to happen, you're going to really like this truck regardless, because by the time it comes out, EV is going to be a reality and it won't seem as big of a stretch as it does right now. So
well,
I'm excited about it.
I hope they prove the naysayers wrong. Ryan, I can't thank you enough for your time, your participation, and coming on the Classic 4x4 podcast. I really appreciate that, and absolutely love what you're doing, and your team at Harvester Homecoming are doing. So again, thank you so much, man.
Oh no, thank you. I enjoy, like I said, I can sit here and talk all day about this because International Harvester has taken over my life over the past, and it's been a really great ride, and I'm really loving it. And I'm always there for anyone.
Cool, man. Well, hey, thank you very much. You have a great day. You be well, stay well, and I hope all of our listeners head out to Harvester Homecoming August 4th and 5th this year in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Thank you.
Excellent insight and insider information from Ryan DuVall on Volkswagen's development of the new EV Scout. Also, I had no idea that Harvester Homecoming pulled such huge attendance numbers. So whether you're an International Harvester enthusiast or not, make sure you make your way out to Fort Wayne, Indiana from August 4th and 5th for this year's Harvester Homecoming. Also, stay tuned for our next guest, Rob Ida, the iconic hot rod designer, fabricator, and builder, where not only do we discuss his builds, but we also discuss how hot rod and 4x4 culture share similar roots revolving around the Willys Overland Company.